Welcome to the meeting room out of office at the meeting show in London. My name's James Lancaster, and I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Claus Raasted. Claus, perhaps you can describe yourself.
I like it much better when you describe me, James, because you
Okay.
use such nice words that I don't.
I would go for overpaid rock star consultant. Does that get close?
See, that is perfect. It even says so on my webpage.
Well, Claus, you're a friend of the meeting show now. You know us very well. You've helped us out with the content for the last few years now, I think. I caught one of your sessions earlier on, the title was Getting Stuff Done. It was a different title, but for the sake of YouTube, we don't like swear words, we'll call it Getting Stuff Done. Very interesting session. We spoke a lot about risk and what stops people getting done. But there's also some kind of biological component there. Can you just explain what you were telling our audience earlier?
So the simple version, and these are not my words, these are words of actual smart people who know what they're talking about, is that evolutionarily speaking, we as humans did not evolve to look like this. Well, we did evolve to look like this, but it took some time to reach that level of perfection, right? We went through the monkey stage and the Neanderthal, and at some point reached the Homo sapiens stage. And for a lot of humanity's existence, our ancestors, you don't have to go back that long, lived lives of, let's not call them quiet desperation, but of lots of risk. Visits to the hospital weren't as easy, life expectancy, actual physical illness, sickness, all these sorts of things used to be a lot worse in many parts of the world, right? But for those of us who live these luxury lives of suits and internet and business, that goes for you as well since you're watching this, it means that our lives are not exactly like those of our ancestors 20,000 years ago. When our brains evolved, then risk was a bit different, because at that point, the potential upside of taking a risk, trying something new, we're not that big. Sure, let's go hunt those rabbits and maybe we'll have food for a couple of days if it goes well. On the other hand, we could fall down a ravine. We could be eaten by saber-toothed tigers. We could eat a plant and get sick by it instead of getting healed. Potential downside was pretty big. And that means that evolutionarily speaking, we are evolved for not really being risk takers. But everything that has driven human evolution, human innovation, is from somebody saying, I wonder what happens if I eat this root, or what if we cook these berries, or what if we tie this rock to a stone? Oh, it's a spear. Evolution happens, especially cultural evolution, when people innovate. And innovation is risky because it might not work.
But we live in a comparatively low risk. The stakes are much lower now, right?
Yes.
So are you saying there's a disconnect between the way our brain perceives risk and what are the actual risks?
Because it means that from an evolution standpoint, the same centers fire in your brain for social risk and for physical risk. So one of the main fears of most people is public speaking, because you're afraid, because your brain says you will die, you will be kicked out of the tribe, you will be eaten by woolly mammoths if you fail at this. And people go, ooh, don't look at me. The reality is what's going to happen, right? You've been on stages a million times. What happens when you bomb? It's not that bad.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. Worst thing is you lose that gig, or somebody laughs, or it's rare that somebody comes up to you after you've been on stage and say, that Claus, that was so bad that I will now break your legs one at a time while having your family watch. That's not what happens, but that's how we feel it. I've had grown people, grown adults in their 40s, crying out of fear of making a single LinkedIn post. Because what happened if it was bad? What would people not? I said, don't worry, nobody's going to care. And even if it goes bad, your life will go on tomorrow, right? We are hardwired for a risky life we no longer lead. And that means that whenever somebody says, let's try something new, let's try something wild, let's try taking our shoes off in the interview, the brain goes, oh my God, what's going to happen, Claus? Will James Lancaster murder you on stage? He probably won't. Probably nothing's going to happen. Probably somebody's going to think, that's silly, the camera won't notice. I may not be invited back, but the actual consequences are low. So take more risk.
And do you see this playing out in the events industry? Do you think the events industry is a low risk industry in terms of stakes?
Obviously, the meeting show and everything associated with it is perfect. No room for improvement. But in a theoretical world, let's call it meeting show 2, like a clone world out there on Earth 2, Yes. Oh my God. Yes. There are so many things that are done the same way as they've always been done, even though people understand their problems, even though they say we should do networking differently, we should do temperature control differently, we should do booths differently, but let's do it safe. Let's play it. It worked last year, so it'll work again this year. And it means that we have so many things that other people have solved that we haven't, because it feels risky. And the longer you do something, there's a piece of, can't remember who came up with this, but the quote is, the longer something has existed, the bigger the chance that it will keep on existing.
Right.
Right? Christmas has been around for a while, and that song, that Holy Night you sing, you're probably going to sing it next year. And it's probably going to be around in 20 years as well, because it's been around for a while. That is counter-innovative, but it's very, very human.
So most event planners are sort of in the food chain of their organization, aren't at the top. They're sort of halfway, perhaps. Are they themselves taking risks that are being rebuffed by senior management? What's the kind of hierarchy there? Are they in a position to take risks? Are they in a position, or are they just constantly going to their board, asking for verification and getting knocked back, do you think?
So first of all, the life of an event planner is for many pretty hard. Not like work in the coal mines somewhere in the life hard, but rough. And part of that is that they are tasked to be innovative. They're tasked to be different and new and fresh without giving permission to be so. I don't want to advocate for rebellion. I do. But sometimes people think that everything needs to be cleared. And the moment you ask, right? Imagine you take something to the legal team at North Star. Their only job in life is to make sure things don't explode. So when you say, can I do this? Their default position will be no. This is the case for many bureaucracies. Bureaucracies live to make things work tomorrow. And that means that when you're the one saying, but could we do it differently? Then their default position will be often no, even if they're well-meaning, even if they're good, even if they're trained. So I think sometimes event planners need to ask for less permission and do things that are less radical, right? Remember when I asked you for permission before taking off my shoes in this interview? Of course you don't, because I didn't. And yet it was sort of okay. If I'd asked, especially if I'd asked beforehand, then you might have thought, yeah, let's not do that, Claus.
But what you're saying is don't take a huge risk, take a small incremental risk and make change that way, almost unnoticed.
Yes, exactly, right? Change the small stuff. The opportunity space is always, 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 always bigger than is apparent, right? When we talk about events, it's usually like, should we try new vendors or new technology or new speakers or new this or new that? It's rarely, what if we hung up a sign next to the coffee machine, of which we only have one, because even after running 20 events, we only have one coffee machine for the one coffee break, and it's never enough. We just hung up a sign, printed sign that says, sorry, we only have one coffee machine, but try something new. While waiting for coffee, talk to a stranger in the queue. It's not going to cost anything. Just do it. Just try it.
I know you're really interested in innovation as well, with your College of Extraordinary Experiences is all about pushing the envelope and stuff like that. How does this play into the innovation piece? How does risk and taking risk, are they the same thing? Is innovation always about taking risk, or can you innovate in a low risk way?
Innovation always feels risky. Always. But if you do something that somebody else has done before, it feels much less risky. One of the problems is, one of the challenges we face is that if we don't go to places where people have tried other things, then how are we going to trust that our new things will work? So then we're standing up against our bosses, our clients, our stakeholders, our audiences, and saying, we're going to try something new. And when it fails, we have all the responsibility. Where if we find somebody who's done it before, let's say there's a conference in Shenzhen in China who is slightly like this, and they've done some new stuff. And you go there and you come home and say, guys, they're doing some pretty cool stuff with how they do podcasts at the event. I think we should do that too. That's much safer than just James sitting at home in his library at his English manor and saying, I have an idea. And then you go to Graham and you say, Graham, we should try new stuff. And he says, no, 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 no. So if we find people who've been there before, it is much less risky because now we know it can be done.
And what about the source of inspiration? Where should people look for inspiration? Is this industry myopic? Is it sort of closed-minded? Are we looking in the right places necessarily?
I generally say that people should look everywhere, but most of all, I say they should allow themselves to be inspired by everything. Because most of us have this tendency that we think inspiration should come in a certain package. You can be inspired by somebody from Google at a speaker event, right? You go to the meeting show, you hear somebody from Google, whatever they talk about, that's an allowable source of inspiration. You sit down and you watch one episode of My Little Pony, and I'm pretty sure you're going to get ideas. But if you go to your bosses and say, I saw an episode of My Little Pony, here's my ideas, they're going to go, whoa. Where if you come with the exact same idea and say, I heard this at a talk from a previous VP of marketing at Google, they'll say, ooh, even if it's the same thing. So allow yourself to be inspired instead of looking too closely at the source of inspiration.
And is that something that has to be conscious? Do you have to flick a switch in your brain and say, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to open my mind to inspiration?
Yes, very much so. Because if you don't, then you're human, like most of us are. And that means that when somebody at Google said it, then it's safe because you can quote that, right? If it's a Winston Churchill quote, you don't have to fight me, you have to fight Winston Churchill. So I can quote Churchill, but if I quote some Nigerian startup, then that's unsafe because I can't borrow their authority. And that's why we tend to, at events, we tend to get people from big businesses with ideas that are innovative but sort of safe, rather than people from the fringe who might be able to do radical change, even at a lot less money and cost and effort, but they don't feel as safe. And that's why for something like this, I love you guys for taking chances. I love the meeting show for taking chances. I just wish there were more of them, instead of safe industry speakers who've been there a lot. And this isn't even bad, right? This is pretty good compared to a lot of places. But there is this, it is, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM is the old slogan. And that's true. It's both a truth, but it's also a problem.
Are we talking a little bit about prejudice there in terms of not looking outside the sort of immediate, how we all look and how we all dress and the kind of countries we're from? And
definitely. I wear the Batman suit to things like this. This means some people say, oh, he must be creative. He must have new ideas. I should talk to him. There are also people who say, that guy, he has nothing to add to my life, because look at him. And even if I do such a simple thing as I change my accent, if I, instead of talking with the American accent, I talk with the Danish accent, suddenly I don't sound that authoritative anymore, because the Danish accent, while very clear and easy to understand, is hard to take seriously, even for well-behaved British people like Mr. Lancaster here. It is hard not to laugh because it sounds silly. And if you want to be an international keynote speaker, do not have the Danish accent or the American one, the middle-aged American man. Hollywood has taught us that that is the voice of trust and authority. Did I say different words? Not necessarily. But even that, even the language, even the voice makes a difference. It shouldn't, but it does.
so you purposefully have sort of conditioned your speaking voice to sound like a middle-aged American.
So it took me a couple of years to get to the middle-aged part, but I was lucky enough to spend a couple of years in my childhood in Seattle, in the US, living there. And that gave me an American accent. And when I moved back to Denmark at the age of 7, I had the language skills, but I could also have chosen to try to shift. And instead I kept the American accent because I felt that, not as a 7-year-old, but later I felt it has served me well. I just wish that it was a British one.
Yeah.
That would be even better, but it's
No,
not.
British
sadly.
people are criminals in Hollywood blockbusters.
But in Europe,
Goes back to the
their
Normans.
culture.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us a bit about the College of Extraordinary Experiences. How is that going? There's a story behind there. It burned down. It's Phoenix from the flames. But you are exhibiting at IMEX earlier this year. Where are we at with the College of Extraordinary Experiences?
So for those who don't know, the College of Extraordinary Experiences is a 5-day event at a castle in Poland where people from all over the world come to unlock new ways of thinking about their business. And whether they are lawyers or meeting planners or bankers or teachers or work in construction, whether they are 20 or 70, whether they are from Sudan or Switzerland, They get to meet people who they otherwise would not have met. So that idea of getting inspired by people you never knew you would meet in ways you never knew, that's what the college is all about. And it doesn't hurt that it's at a medieval castle in Poland. We dress up people a little bit like Harry Potter. It's a little bit crazy, a little bit mad. But at the core of it is this idea of connecting people to new thoughts and new ideas and new ways of thinking.
It's an annual event now, is it?
It's an annual event. The next
Yeah.
time is in September. We're running it for the 10th year now.
Great.
So we have a 10th anniversary coming up in 2026.
And it's all about
it's fun.
trying out new formats,
Yes,
trying
yes,
out
and
new ways of designing events.
new ways of designing events, new ways of designing experiences, new ways of thinking. And that means that people who come tend to, not all, but tend to leave with some new thinking, some new, oh, I didn't even know that was possible, because they met somebody who works for something completely different. Traditional Japanese Buto dancing or American business psychology, right? And they get to sit down and talk with those people without trying to sell, without stages, just as a conversation. And they get to ask questions, they get to be curious. And because we spend time building trust, it means when they reach that barrier of, okay, that sounds bizarre or weird or even offensive, instead of going, ew, then people will go, tell me more. And that leads to interesting rabbit holes, and that leads to transformation, both personal and business.
Sounds great. So if somebody out there is still procrastinating and a bit nervous about putting something to their board or trying something new, just what one piece of advice, what kind of mind nugget can you give them just to get over that hurdle?
Well, apart from hiring overpriced rockstar consultants in Batman suits, go to the fringes. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, even though that looks cool. Go to the places where you won't meet people like yourselves. Go to the places where your competition is. Go to This Is Great. I love industry events. But go to spaces where nobody looks like you and nobody knows your name. And then listen and talk and be inspired and allow yourself to be inspired. Even if you think, why should I go to an astrology conference in Peru? Well, you can be damn sure that's going to be different than what you're used to. And if you take something away from there that is wild and noteworthy, and you think, they can do it, so I can do it, you can be pretty sure your competition isn't tapping the same well of inspiration.
Claus, thank you for joining us in the meeting room.